Good evening and welcome to the Security, Safety, Transportation Subcommittee meeting. Today is October 1st and it's 6 p.m. We are located at the George Romm Little Theater, 470 Forest Ave, here in the wonderful city of Brockton. In order to commence this meeting, I will call the meeting to order by establishing a quorum. Mrs. Sullivan?
Yeah.
Mr. Gomes?
Here.
Mr. Vega?
Here.
Ms. Oliver?
Yeah.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Myself as the vice chair is present, and Superintendent Secretary Tellini is here. Mrs. Azak and the mayor will be absent today due to being under the weather, and we wish them a speedy recovery. Prior to the meeting, if we can all stand and salute the American flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Went out of order a little bit there. We already established the quorum. Today's meeting is in regards to the discussion of the DESI Safety Audit Report, which was done by the Ed Davis, which was paid for by DESI, and I will hand the reins to the superintendent.
Good evening, everyone. So I just wanted to start by giving some information on the process. So today during the subcommittee meeting, I will be presenting to you the forward-facing presentation provided to us by DESI. Then after tonight's regular meeting, we will be having an executive session where we discuss the plans that were given to us by DESI. And obviously many of those remain confidential and private due to the safety and security measures that they outline. So today is informational in nature. Then we will come back on October 15th and we will be presenting our response to the plan, or our response in the form of a plan for what we will be doing this upcoming year and into the future. Many of the items and recommendations that we will be talking about or that you will be seeing are some things that we've already put into place, so that's wonderful. But again, on October 15th, I'll be able to present to you a comprehensive update of what we've done, what we're in the process of doing, and then what we plan to do in future years. So here's the agenda of the items that we will be going over in tonight's presentation. So we're going to be starting with the overview. So as was mentioned, following a series of safety and security related incidents last winter, Brockton Public Schools and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education signed an addendum to an existing MOU that we already have with DESI, which facilitated the completion of a comprehensive safety audit, which was ultimately completed by the Edward Davis Company. So research shows that there are 4 drivers of school quality. And the one that we're looking at when talking about safety and security is the first one on this list, which is restorative and positive school climate. So we need to work together as a school administration and as a school committee to determine how to leverage the findings of this safety audit in order to ensure the best outcomes towards achieving our goal of creating a restorative and positive school climate. So as you all know, BHS is one of the largest schools on the East Coast, the second largest in New England, and the largest in Massachusetts. Enrollment is higher than what you see listed here, as it's currently between 3,700 and 3,800. The audit found, which I'm sure doesn't come as a big surprise, that the budget challenges we've faced as a district have been a significant contributor to the safety challenges that we saw emerge last school year. And this also indicates a need for policy and systemic shifts to ensure a sustained and safe and secure environment. So as I mentioned, the Ed Davis Company was contracted to conduct the audit at BHS and by extension, Edison Day Edison Evening Academy. Also, it conducted an audit at Edison Day, which is now Champion, Promise, and the Brockton Therapeutic Day School. They partnered with TRC Security and Emergency Management on this work. And obviously, we now know that some of these findings are either no longer relevant or need to be adjusted a little bit as the school no longer occupies the space that it was in last year. So we will be taking that into account when we present the plan for implementation next week. Here are some of the key terms and their definitions, which are fundamental to the work done and help guide our understanding of these findings. So the findings summarized here are what's authorized to be released publicly, which is a decision that was made at the DESE level to ensure that the findings themselves didn't further jeopardize any safety or security measures or efforts that we make. During the review conducted between March and the end of June, EDC identified several concerns which they indicated could be addressed through changes to either our physical assets or to our current existing policy. EDC found that security personnel did not have role clarity and that they were not clearly identifiable. Again, of note, so many of these findings are from March to June of last year, but it's good to know that since this audit has taken place, like I mentioned, there already has been some development in these areas, including the fact that we have hired a full-time safety and security director to oversee the safety and security specialist team and to provide that clarity that was missing. We've also made progress on getting those individuals uniforms and the equipment that they need in order to make them more identifiable around the school building and to improve their communication. EDC also outlined training and emergency response gap, which also need to be addressed. One challenge that the evaluators faced was the uncertainty at the time about some programmatic moves, which have since been settled and will allow Director Jackson and his team to better plan for long-term safety and security needs. They also identified policies and procedures that were applied inconsistently across the program at BHS. So as for some of the recommendations, among the key recommendations were ensuring security procedures and supervision remained more consistent, that security personnel be plainly identifiable, and that annual security awareness training be provided that's tailored to staff roles so that everyone can better recognize and respond to potential emergencies. This also includes regular drills and thorough crisis team debriefings and updates as needed. You could also think of that as sort of an after-action report following drills, where we would identify any shortcomings and address them. EDC also recommended standardizing a protocol of always carrying radios with training to accompany those protocols and integrating those protocols with existing communication assets. As note on this as well, we have identified a vendor to provide these radios and we're working on finalizing the purchase process to acquire them. EDC also recommended providing clear and practical expectations to school leaders before the end of each year. They also encouraged us to develop standardized plans for security and emergency response, prioritizing classroom coverage, and deploying staff to cover for absences and maintain positive learning environments, while also developing and consistently applying policies and procedures. I'd note here, too, that BHS has already revamped its approach to handling teachers absent without a sub, providing class rosters to coverage staff in the IRCs in red and green, and requiring students in those classes to check in when they arrive, which is resulting in improved accountability for students. So here they've outlined how they approached this work, including their efforts to identify primary assets and areas that needed to support BHS's overall mission, evaluated vulnerabilities, and presented a security plan with a variety of mitigation and protection steps. So EDC and TRC looked at external risks. They hosted kickoff meetings with principals at the schools they looked at and had discussions with them. They had discussions also with students, parents, and staff to get a sense of the day-to-day security landscape. Finally, the reviewers also noted other elements that contributed to their work, including third-party data reports, on-site and virtual interviews, and the TASS assessment tool that identifies risk, vulnerabilities, and threats. And again, during the executive session, the school committee will be able to review the TASS tool and some of the risk assessments in further detail. And with that, I'll take any questions, but I'll actually return to my seat if that's okay.
Thank you, Superintendent, for that presentation. I will open the floor to the members if you have any questions regarding the presentation. Mrs. Oliver?
The safety specialists have the uniform already?
No, we are, they are wearing, clothing that is consistent to make sure that they're identifiable. We're actually in the process of getting them uniforms. And so the security director, Robert Jackson, he's identified the uniforms that he wants, and we're in the process of purchasing them.
So at this time, what are they wearing exactly to basically, differential from students? Because a lot of them do kind of look like students. So
Yes, they do. I actually don't know the answer to that
Okay.
question, I'm sorry. But I do
good
know
for you.
that we are looking at teal for their regular uniforms.
Not red?
I did see the perspective uniforms, yeah.
And we're also having conversation with the ones we're hiring and the ones we have in place now regarding the boundaries. They're there to basically make sure it's safety at all time. They're not there to be our kids' friends, but also to make sure that our kids are safe and not create this overstepping the boundaries of what their job title is and what they're supposed to be doing at all times.
Absolutely, and I will say that Mr. Jackson has been setting a tone for what that should look like. He actually is currently in the process of interviewing more security specialists because we did have positions available, but he has been meeting with the security specialists, setting expectations, following up with feedback, and I do know that he is ensuring that everybody is following is meeting those expectations. He has very high expectations for the team in order to ensure that some of the concerns from last year don't roll over to this year, and I will say that he is enacting those expectations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions by Mr. Sullivan, followed by Mr. Vega?
Yes, Dr. Tiliani. Ed Davis Company, is that the Ed Davis from Boston? Boston
I
Police?
believe so.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised that he didn't talk to any of us here. Not even a question.
That's a good point, actually. Yes.
The other thing, I'm not sure if you even know what the cost was. What did he charge for that?
I do know that Desi paid for it. I do not know what the cost was.
It's not free, I'm guessing that.
It was not, it was to us, so that's good.
I guess we'll find out later on when we get in executive. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Vega, followed by Mr. Gomes.
I just want to say, I got the opportunity last week to visit with Principal McCaskill at BHS. We got the chance to do a little bit of a walkthrough of the building. And, when we talk about things in this report, the finding or the recommendation that was made around doing what's necessary to clear out the cafeterias during, and to work out coverage for staff absences. We went through all 4 cafeterias. They were ghost towns. A similar walkthrough last year, there were, students were waving at me as we were passing through. So it's like night and day. So it's really, it really drives home the point that some of these recommendations are already in place. And there's still work to be done, but there's already traction. So you mentioned, we were talking about uniforms. We're talking about annual security training, PD, new comm systems. So, do you think that fits within the existing budget, or is that a conversation to have going forward?
So that's a great question, and as we are looking into the plan moving forward, and you'll see some of the details of the plans in executive session, that there are items that we have not identified that were not worked into this year's budget, but also they would be okay to happen in a future year. I would say that based on what I imagine was a priority for safety and security last year, there was a budget built in for this year, and it seems like all of the priority items would be covered in this year's budget.
Thank you, Mr. Gomes.
Thank you. I think Mr. Vega's insight does kind of go towards my question. I was going to ask, it did mention, you can hear me, right? It did mention that the issue with students, and having teachers without sub. Do you know the rate of teachers without sub or teachers being absent currently?
At the high school or in the district?
That both.
I actually don't know for either, so
No.
I don't know why I asked. But I can get you both of those. Yes, that is something that we have been working on and discussing as a district. I know it is an area, and as I'm sure everyone has seen, chronic absenteeism is an issue around the state for our students, but we've also been talking about it, especially with the onset of COVID and all of these things, that it has impacted staff as well. So some of the things we've been speaking about from an HR perspective is that we have been supporting principals already about what those communications and supports should look like for staff in order to make sure that we are, lessening those absences over time. But I can get you those numbers.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan.
I just wanted to follow up on that for Mr. Gomes. We do get a report who's absent at the high school every day. So who's ever absent at the high school, we get that on our email.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. And the other thing was, sorry.
Come back to you. No problem.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan?
Just one follow-up. We, in the report, there was something about radios. Everybody should have a radio. Who was everybody?
Yeah, that's a great question, because not everybody. I think it really means more of the leadership team and the support staff. So it really does range from building to building. I don't think it means not everybody, not all of the teachers, but those who are supporting the building from an administrative level should all have radios. That being said, we should also have working PA systems. We should have communication methods between the classrooms as well. But as for the actual walkie-talkies or radios, that would be the administrative professionals.
Just wanted to add that we have been to a lot of schools, and every classroom that I've been to, it's a different time. Every single class.
Is it different what?
Time, the clocks.
Oh, on the displays,
And none of the clocks are working, or they're working wrong.
the digital ones, correct?
No, like this clock here.
Oh, yes. No, that's definitely true. My understanding is that we had transitioned to the digital ones that also have announcements. So those ones should all be on the correct time. But yes, as far as, I actually don't know how many of those we continue to have or what their timing looks like, but I can certainly find out. But I know that the transition of the district was to move to the more digitized versions, because they can also carry announcements. They have a greater, they have greater abilities to provide security support and communication than the typical radio just with the speaker.
And I heard it was nice to have, in case of an emergency, you could talk into that clock somehow. Not this one, but
I don't know all of the capabilities of those, and I know
Something-
that we're not utilizing them to their full capability.
Right.
But yes, they are supposed to have greater security measures.
yeah, two-way conversation somehow, or emergency lights.
Yes, but to that point about communications, it needs to be followed up with training. So if folks need to know how to use it, so just having the device, having the walkie-talkies there, and that was part of what was was highlighted in the report, is making sure that not only does everybody have the updated or appropriate device, but that they also have the training to utilize it.
What happened to the old ones? Because they used to have radios. I've seen people with radios.
You mean the walkie-talkies?
Yeah,
Yes,
two-way
they-
radio.
Yeah, they do have those. So not everybody, and I think that was the point of the presentation, is making sure that they are used more broadly and consistently throughout every building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan.
Oh, I remembered what I was going to say. I don't know if anybody else noticed this, my committee members, but on the reports that we do get from the high school, I've noticed a marked improvement in teacher attendance. So I just wanted, that was the other thing I was going to say. So I wanted to thank the teachers for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any follow-up? Mr. We did approve, this is probably like 2 years ago, we did approve 300 of those digital clocks, but I know they wanted a little bit more, so the price tag was very hefty. And I, walked the warehouse, and I know they were all out of there, so they're installing them, but we can probably work with the superintendent and have the company come back in and do a presentation what the functions are of those clocks. I want to thank the Ed Davis Company and TRC for doing this, this audit. It didn't cost the district anything, but, any help that we can get, we will take. Like Mr. Vega said, the high school is, from last year to this year, is a total turnaround from the yonder bags. And as Ms. Sullivan, those emails that we get, make sure that we get that on a daily basis with the attendance. It's dropped dramatically, so that's a huge help that these students are not supervised or in the cafeteria, but actually in the classroom. So this evening we'll go into executive session, as superintendent stated, and we'll get more detailed security measures that we don't want to, put out there in the public before it's implemented. And, we also received an audit that was done by Lieutenant Banaka, Brockton Police, with those assessments as well, and combining all those together to make sure that the school is nice and safe and a good learning environment moving forward. So with that, thank you very much. If anybody has any follow-up questions or any statements at this time.
The last thing I will state is that, yes, Lieutenant Banaka had also done a security and risk assessment that everyone received and that we'll also be reviewing as well. And he had given that to us earlier this school year. And I will just, before we got the audit, and I will just say it, then reading this after having read his security and risk assessment, I felt like there was a lot of it was very much aligned, and a lot of his assessment was exactly right on. So many of the things that had been that will be identified in the audit in executive session had already been addressed by Lieutenant Banaka. So I just want to thank him and his team. I think it's a testament to the great support that we have here in the school department from our school police, because I do think that as this conversation has been elevated and we have been talking about it more, that we have been leveraging the actual internal expertise we have. And I think just from looking at that report, we clearly have the right expertise on board in order to do this.
Thank you. With that, do we have any other business? If not, I could entertain an adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion was made to adjourn by Mrs. Sullivan, properly seconded by Mr. Sullivan. A show of hands. Unanimous. We adjourned.